Have you ever wondered how we get answers we can actually trust? You know, the real deal? Well, it isn't magic, and it's definitely not just guesswork. It all starts with a plan. So let's dive in. We're talking about research design, which is basically the essential blueprint you need to build any kind of reliable discovery.
So here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll talk about what this blueprint for research even is. Then we'll get into the different building styles you can choose from. After that, we'll look at where you get your materials, your data, and check out the tools of the trade. And finally, we'll see how it all comes together to turn raw data into a real breakthrough.
Okay, first up, your blueprint for research. The big idea here, and it's a really important one, is that trustworthy knowledge isn't something you just stumble upon by accident. Nope, it has to be carefully, deliberately designed from the ground up.
I mean, think about it for a second. If you were going to build a house, a really sturdy one, you wouldn't just show up with a pile of wood and start nailing boards together, would you? Of course not. You'd need a detailed plan, a blueprint. Well, the exact same logic applies when you're trying to build a reliable answer to a question.
And that, right there, is precisely what a research design is. The source material calls it an architectural plan for a study, and I think that's perfect. It's the master plan that lays out every single method and procedure to make sure the entire process is logical, systematic, and totally sound.
Now, this is where it gets really practical. A good design isn't just some stuffy academic exercise. It saves you a ton of time, effort, and money. It makes sure your results are both valid, meaning you're actually measuring what you think you're measuring, and reliable, which means you could do it again and get the same results. And this last one is absolutely crucial. It allows other researchers to replicate your study. That's how science works. It's how we check each other's work and build on discoveries over time.
All right, let's move on. So, once you get why you need a blueprint, the next step is choosing your building style. Are you just scouting new territory? Are you drawing a super detailed map? Or are you running a full-on stress test in a controlled lab?
This table breaks down the three basic types of research design perfectly. You've got exploratory, for when a problem is still kind of fuzzy. Then there's descriptive, when you need a really detailed snapshot of what's going on. And finally, experimental, which is what you use when you need to prove cause and effect. Each one has its purpose, and picking the right one is all about trade-offs between things like flexibility, detail, and certainty. So, an exploratory design is all about being flexible. It's for when you're venturing into brand new territory. But here's the trade-off. You get some really valuable first insights, but you can't really draw firm conclusions from it. Think of it as the starting point, not the finish line.
A descriptive design, on the other hand, is much more structured. This is where you're creating that detailed map. Think of a big political poll before an election. It perfectly answers who, what, where, and when. The trade-off here? It can't definitively tell you why something is happening.
And then we've got the experimental design. This is really the gold standard for figuring out cause and effect. This is where you isolate variables, you have control groups, and you run very specific tests. The power here is immense, but the trade-off is that it can be super expensive, complex, and sometimes a controlled lab setting doesn't perfectly mirror the messy real world.
Okay, so you've picked your building style. Awesome. Now you need the materials to build with. You need data. And this brings us to a really fundamental choice. Are you going to gather your own materials from scratch? Or are you going to use what's already on the shelf?
And this is that classic trade-off between primary and secondary data. Primary data is like custom-milled lumber. You collect it yourself for your exact project. It's a perfect fit, but man, it can cost you in time and money. Secondary data is more like the off-the-shelf stuff from the hardware store. Think census data or old company reports. It's fast, it's cheap, but you're kind of at the mercy of its quality, and it might not be exactly what you need.
So whether you're using custom-made or off-the-shelf materials, you need the right tools to actually work with them. So let's open up the Researcher's Toolkit and look at the tools for collection and measurement.
The tool you pick really depends on that building style you chose earlier. So for descriptive designs, surveys are king. For exploratory work, just watching what people do, observation, can be incredibly powerful. And for experimental designs, well, the experiment itself is the central tool.
But look, just gathering information is only half the battle. You have to be able to measure it, right? So here's the crucial point. Measurement is the process of turning these abstract qualities like, say, customer loyalty or brand perception into concrete numbers that we can actually work with and analyze.
And you know, not all measurement is created equal. There are basically 4 levels of precision here. It starts with nominal, which are just simple labels like yes or no. Then you have ordinal, which gives us a rank order like first, second, and third place. Interval scales have equal spacing like temperature, but no real zero. And at the very top, you've got ratio scales, which have a true zero, like your age or your height. The higher the level you can use, the more powerful your analysis can be.
So how do researchers actually create these rulers in the real world? They use something called scaling techniques. And I promise you have absolutely seen these before. One of the most common ones out there is called the Likert scale.
Here is a perfect everyday example. You're given a statement, and you're asked to rate how much you agree on a scale. This simple but honestly brilliant tool takes a fuzzy, subjective feeling, satisfaction, and turns it into a hard number. A number that can be measured, averaged, and compared across thousands of people. It's incredibly powerful stuff.
And that brings us to our final section, from data to discovery. Okay, we've laid out the plan, we've gathered the materials, and we've picked out our tools. Now let's put it all together and see the final structure. And really, this is the whole thing in a nutshell. Your research design is the blueprint. Your data, whether it's primary or secondary, are the materials. Your collection methods and your measurement scales are the tools. And when all three of those work together in a systematic way, you build something that stands strong, a credible, reliable finding.
So let's wrap this up with the big ideas to take with you. If you remember one thing, it's that the research design is the foundational blueprint. Everything rests on it. Second, the kind of question you're asking determines your whole approach. Are you exploring, describing, or experimenting? Third, remember you always have a choice in your materials, weighing the pros and cons between fresh data and existing data. And finally, the precision of your ruler, how you measure things, is what dictates just how deep your insights can ultimately be.
And that's our look at the architecture of a good answer. Which, leaves us with one final thought. Now that you understand the blueprint behind the claims you see every single day, the design choices, the data sources, the measurement tools, which headlines or studies or statistics are you going to start to look at just a little